Seeing that the meal was served, the police chief invited his guests to interrupt their game and have something to eat. An appetizing aroma had been tickling their nostrils for some time, and Sobakevich had already peeped into the dining room and taken special note of the white sturgeon on its large plate. Each guest emptied a glass of dark, olive-colored vodka, reminiscent of the transparent Siberian stones from which seals are made in Russia. And now, armed with forks, surrounded the table, each revealing to the world his tastes and inclinations, one concentrating on caviar, another on salmon, yet another on cheese. Sobakevich, bypassing all these trifles, planted himself squarely in front of the white sturgeon, and while the others nibbled, drank, and chatted, he polished it off in just a little over 15 minutes, so that when the police chief remembered it and saying, "Now, gentlemen, won't you do honor to this natural phenomenon?" approached it fork in hand, he saw that there was nothing left of the natural phenomenon but the tail. Sobakevich, pretending that he knew nothing about the white sturgeon, had worked his way toward a plate set a bit apart from the others and was taking a few nonchalant stabs at a little dry fish. After which, full of the sturgeon, he sat back in an armchair and did no further eating or drinking. He simply sat there, half closing and blinking his eyes. It looked as though the police chief was not in the habit of stinting wine, for they drank innumerable toasts. First they drank, as might be supposed, to the health of the new landowner of Kherson province, then to the welfare of his peasants, and to their resettlement. Then to the health of his beautiful future bride, a toast that caused Chichikov's face to break into a pleasant grin. Then they surrounded him and pleaded with him to stay in town for at least a couple of weeks more. "Oh no, you can't go just like that," they said, trying to persuade him. "You can't pop in and out like this. It just lets the cold air in. No, you must spend more time with us. And then we'll find you a wife. We'll find you a wife. We'll marry you off. We'll marry him off, won't we, Ivan Grigorievich?" "Certainly we'll find him a wife," the president agreed. "And you may resist as much as you like. You can hold on for dear life and dig your feet in. We'll still drag you into marriage. You can count on that. We don't joke about such things." "Well, perhaps I won't resist as much as you think. Marriage is not such a frightening thing as long as there's a bride." "There'll be a bride. Nothing to worry about on that score. There'll be everything you could wish." "Well, if there'll be..." "Good! Bravo! Hurrah! Long life!" they all shouted, coming up to him and clinking glasses. When Chichikov had touched every glass with his own, they shouted, "Now let's do it again!" And they clinked glasses once more. And then they all wanted to clink glasses a third time and did so. Within quite a short time, everyone felt extraordinarily happy. The president of the district court was a sweet man anyway, and now when he felt a bit gay, he kept throwing his arms around Chichikov, murmuring words which came straight from his overflowing soul. "Bless your little heart, I love you as though you were my own mother." And then, snapping his fingers, he began dancing around Chichikov, singing a popular song that began with the words, "Hey, you dashing peasant lad, from the village of Kamarinsk." When they had finished the champagne, they opened some bottles of Tokay, which brought on even more gaiety and animation. They forgot completely about cards and argued, shouted, talked about all sorts of things. Politics, military affairs. They even expressed some pearls of free thought for which, at any other time, they'd have given their children a good spanking. And, while they were at it, they solved many intricate problems. Chichikov had never been in such a delightful mood. He had begun to feel as though he were really a landowner of Kherson province, and spoke about various improvements he thought of introducing on his estates, including a 3-field crop rotation system. He spoke about the happiness, the bliss, resulting from the fusion of two souls, and started to recite to Sobakevich Werther's epistle in verse to Charlotte, over which Sobakevich, still sitting back in his armchair, blinked his eyes because, being full of the white sturgeon, he was pervaded by a great desire to have a nap. Chichikov, realizing this and also that he was losing control of himself, expressed the wish to be driven home. availing himself of the offer of the public prosecutor's carriage. By great good luck, the prosecutor's coachman turned out to be an experienced man who, holding the reins in one hand, managed to thrust the other behind him to support the gentleman. Thus, in the prosecutor's carriage, Chichikov reached his inn, where for quite a while afterward all sorts of nonsense kept running off the tip of his tongue. He babbled about his blonde, rosy young bride with a dimple on her right cheek, about his villages in Kherson province, about his capital. He even instructed Selifan to gather together all the peasants who were to be transported to Kherson and to take a roll call. Selifan listened to him for a long time in complete silence and then left the room, telling Petrushka shortly, "Go and undress the master." Petrushka started to pull off Chichikov's boots, almost pulling the rest of his master onto the floor with them. Finally, the boots were off, and the master was properly undressed. After tossing about in the unmercifully creaking bed, he went to sleep, feeling indisputably that he was a Kherson landowner. Petrushka, in the meantime, picked up his trousers and his cranberry red frock coat, took them out into the corridor, and having hung them on a wooden coat stand, began to use a beater and a brush on them, filling the whole corridor with dust. As he was about to take them off the stand, he glanced out of the window and saw Selifan in the yard, returning from the stables. Their eyes met, and they understood each other without words. The master was asleep, and this was a good opportunity to go off somewhere. Petrushka took the master's trousers and coat back to his room and then joined Selifan downstairs. They went out together without saying a word about the purpose of their expedition, chatting as they went about other subjects. They didn't have far to go. They crossed the street to the house facing the inn, which they entered through a low, grimy glass door leading into a sort of basement, in which many people were already sitting at wooden tables. Some of these people shaved their beards, others didn't. Some wore unlined jackets, and others were in their shirt sleeves. Some were even sitting there in their overcoats. What Petrushka and Selifan did there, God alone knows. But they emerged an hour later, their arms linked and maintaining complete silence, full of little attentions to each other and protecting each other from all sorts of protruding corners. Still arm in arm, it took them a quarter of an hour to get upstairs. But finally they got there, for a minute perhaps. Petrushka stood before his low bed, thinking of the most suitable way to lie down. Then finally he lay down crosswise, so that his feet remained on the floor. Then Selifan stretched himself out so that his head rested in the middle of Petrushka's belly, forgetting that he shouldn't have been sleeping there at all, but in the servants' quarters, or in the stables near his horses. Both went to sleep, raising a snore of incredibly low pitch, to which their master replied from his bedroom with a thin, nasal whistling. Soon after, everything quieted down. The whole inn was fast asleep, except for a light in one window of the room in which the lieutenant from Ryazan was staying. He was a great lover of boots, apparently, for he had already had 4 pairs made to order for him, and now had been trying on a 5th pair for a long while. He went over to his bed a number of times, intending to kick them off and lie down, but he couldn't bring himself to do it. The boots were so wonderfully constructed that he kept lifting a foot again and again to examine the beautifully shaped heel.